Okay, so I'm going to call the Finance Committee meeting to order for November 17, 2023. And then after I do that, I'm going to ask Austin Surratt to call the meeting of the trustees to get order, because he is a quorum of his committee present, and Lynn is keeping an eye out to see if we end up with a quorum of the council, and then we'll have to pause to do that too. But this meeting is being recorded. We are holding it virtually, as is permitted by the open meeting law, but it's being recorded both for audio and visual purposes. So you should be aware that we are doing recording of this meeting, and I'm going to call on the members of the Finance Committee to make sure that they can hear and we can hear them, and then we will I'll turn it over to Austin for a moment to call the trustees to order. So I think we still don't have Anna here.
You do have a quorum. Shalini is here.
But we do have a quorum. Okay, so Lynn is going to have to, in a minute, I'll call Lynn too. But Lynn, we can hear you, I assume?
Yes.
Okay. Bob Hegner?
Here.
Matt Holloway?
Here.
Bernie Kubiak?
Here.
Kathy Shane?
Here.
And Alicia Walker?
Here.
Okay, so I'll note that all of the members of the committee who are present, which is all but one at this point, can hear and be heard. And I'm going to, since we now have a quorum of the council present, I'll turn it over to Lynn for a moment.
Seeing that we have a quorum of the council present, I'm calling the town council to order on November 17th, 2023 at 1:05. I want to make sure that Mandy Johanneke, you can hear us.
Present.
And Michelle Miller, you can hear us.
Present.
And Shalini Ball-Milne.
Present.
Okay, thank you.
Austin, do you want to?
Thank you, Andy. Calling the meeting of the Jones Library Board of Trustees to order. Farah?
Here.
Bob? Pam? You need to unmute.
You're muted.
Thank you, Bob. Thank you, Bob. Lee Edwards?
Present.
And Austin Sarrett, I'm here. Okay.
Tammy's here.
Tammy's here too.
Oh, I didn't see Tammy.
And Lynn Pam Rooney just joined.
Okay. Tammy, you want to indicate that you're here? Unmute.
Tammy, please unmute.
Can you speak, Tammy? Okay, she's indicated she's here by raising her hand.
Okay. Pam Rooney, you hear us?
I can.
Thank you.
Okay, so let me explain. Thank everybody for attending, and this meeting is going to really focus on the question of that's being presented regarding library and bond authorization. And I'm going to turn it over to Paul in a minute, who's going to lay the context based on the memorandum that he gave to the council on Monday. Is sort of the first part of the introduction. And then we have an order that we're going to proceed with. But as I said, the Finance Committee is probably not going to be able to do much afterwards, because I think this is going to be a fairly thorough discussion of one item. So, Lynn, were you going to add anything?
Yes. First of all, Tammy, could you lower your hand, please? So given that we have not been able to put all of the documents into the packet until the last hour, we are not expecting the Finance Committee to take a vote to recommend to the council today, which means on the 20th of November, while there will still be a public forum with regard to the library at 7 o'clock, along with the other financial orders, the actual, any further vote on the library, the earliest that it would happen is December 4th, when the council meets again. Meantime, the Finance Committee is meeting again on November 20th at 2 o'clock and on December 1st at 1 o'clock. Okay, thank you.
I think you meant, was it the 20th, Lynn?
Yep.
Or 28th?
I'm sorry, November 28th. Thank you. At 2 and December 1st at 1. And I believe somebody else just joined, but I'm trying to see who it might be. And I don't see anybody.
So I'm gonna ask Paul, did you want to do anything in the way of introduction in your presentation?
Sure.
Anna, excuse me, Paul. Anna has joined. Do you want to make sure, Andy, she can hear?
Anna, we just
Hi,
okay, we just wanted to confirm that you
thank
could hear
you.
us.
Sorry for my lateness. I'm present.
No, that's fine. Paul, sorry, thank you.
Great, thank you. So this is, thank you for considering this order and for the council and for all of the elected officials and appointed officials who are here today. It's really appreciate the effort you're putting in on a Friday afternoon. This is a request for an appropriate the sum of $9,860,100 for the expansion and renovation of the Jones Library. This is on top of the original projected cost of $36,279,000, which included a local share of $15,751,810. That local share is not changing in terms of the appropriation. I don't need to go into details. Everybody is very familiar with the library project. This number, the $46 million number, is from the most recent cost estimates that we have from two different cost estimators, and Bob Parent, our special capital projects person, is here to help if there are any questions about how we arrived at that number. We think it's pretty solid, and it includes all the inflationary projections that we can possibly include, and also incorporates all the inflation that happened mostly because of the pandemic. And so we think that this is the number. It's the number we are asking you to approve. And then with this vote, this project can proceed to the next phase, which is bidding the project and then contracting with someone to start the build. And I think I'll just leave it there. We have more information to share about the cost projections and things like that, but that's the next phase.
Okay. Thank you, Paul. There's new material that has been produced today, as Lynn previously indicated, that has been added to the Finance Committee packet for today's meeting. Athena, is also going into any council packet or other locations for people who are looking for it? Athena?
I haven't added the last minute items from the Finance Committee meeting to the council packet on Monday yet, but everything is in the Finance Committee packet for today.
And that is available on the website, and
That's correct.
For committee members, it's available on the Finance Committee SharePoint. For everybody, it's available, including the public. It's available on the Finance Committee page of the town website. So with that, what we're going to do is next talk about one of the new items, which is a new cash flow analysis, which really responds to a number of the questions that were asked. And I'm going to ask Lynn, who was working with our staff and with our Dave Eisenthal, to produce it. So Lynn, I'm turning the meeting over to you for the moment so that we can get an introduction and make that presentation. And but I guess I should ask Pam, do you have your hands up for a question?
Yes. Could someone point me to that document in the packet? I'm not seeing it and I would like to see it in a screen that's large enough to read. What is the title of it?
It is, hold on one second. It is called Finance Jones Library Projection Revision to November 17th, 2023.
So Lynn, go ahead.
Okay. And Athena, you need to make me co-host.
You should be able to share your screen.
Okay. So the first thing I want to show you is actually, hold on. Just be patient with me. Is the following breakdown. And the reason I'm showing you this is because in the sheet I'm going to show you in a minute, it's not exactly in this order. The total cost of the project, as we've discussed, is 46.1 million. The town share is and remains at 15.751 million. MBLC's share, which started out somewhere in around 13 something, is now increased because there is a sixth payment, and that is 15.5 million. The CPA is $1 million. That leaves the trustees with the goal of raising 13.822 million. Being fair to the trustees, however, I want to make sure you understand they have been extremely active in increasing the amount for MBLC, and they wrote the proposal for CPA. So in many ways, the dollars that are included here and in here belong to the trustees as well to the whole town. Again, the total project is as follows. Going to take that down and we're going to go to the cash flow. And I will try to make this as large as I can, but I also want to ask Jennifer LaFontaine, who is one of the co-finance directors, and thank her for her work today and yesterday and the days before, and also David Eisenthal, who is our financial advisor to the town. I'm going to try to increase the size of this in a moment. Are you still seeing it on the screen, and is it any bigger?
It is
Yes.
bigger.
Yes,
Okay, great.
just about.
Okay, so one of the things I want to point out on this is a couple things. First of all, we're going to go through what the MBLC is going to give us and when it's expected they will give us. When will the CPA money kick in? When will the other donations kick in? And I want to point out that this is an estimate and needs to be further checked with the trustees, but it does not change the bottom line. I also want to point out that, as you will see, actual expenditures are just beginning, if you will, in this line right here. So while we have been receiving money, we haven't been spending any money. And that is because MBLC and the library have started paying us in advance. And they continue to pay us in advance as they have money. So, you know, MBLC sometime around February of next year gives us another 2.7 million. We estimate that the library sometime around here will give us another $1 million. So we don't actually get to the point that we are borrowing any money until April 30th of 2024, based on this spreadsheet. And that's important because when you're not borrowing money, you're not incurring any interest. At the same time, for the MBLC money and any other money given to us by the library, we will actually be earning interest. And it is a requirement that that interest has to then be placed back into the project. So just to give you an example, we haven't accounted for it here, but we've already earned about $60,000 on the money that the MBLC has given us. So keeping in mind, we don't even have to start borrowing until we are out of the money that people have given us. And that is not, again, until April of 2024. So as you go through the cash flow, you'll see CPA money comes in here. Or I'm sorry, CPA is here. Here's estimated donations from the library. And the way this has been structured from the very beginning is that by the time we finish the project and the library takes occupancy and we finish the last payment from MBLC, at that point, MBLC will have provided us with a total of 15.56. We will have the $1 million of the CPA, and the library, because they have now dealt with banks and had a discussion with banks and with Mass Development, they will not be asking the town to float their debt. They will float their own debt, whatever is left for the fundraising. And in floating their own debt, they will not be putting their endowment at risk. So when you get done at that point, what you have is the only thing that we are borrowing on is, in fact, the money that the town is lending. So let me just mention again, as construction happens, you keep borrowing, but only as you need it. And at some point, you then consolidate, usually at the end of construction, you consolidate your loans into one final loan. And in fact, if more favorable interest rates are available, you can refinance that depending on the conditions of the loan. So when you go down to this page on this, you actually can see that the actual interest on the loan is $7,944, $389. This is, excuse me, million. Thank you. 7 million. Thank you, Kat. And that is if there's any difference between that and what we estimated in the past, it's only because interest rates are different. So one of the big questions that people have been asking is, well, how much is this additional cost going to cost the town? And the reality is, because the library will be paying the town all of their share by 2027, MBLC will be paying all of their share by 2027. The town will not be paying on any more interest on anybody else's money but ours. And that's the number right there that's estimated. So I'm going to take this down for the minute, unless, Andy, you can be on the alert for questions if people have them, since this was one of the most interesting. I also want to ask Jennifer LaFontaine and David if they would like to add any comments to this.
Well, I think that
Mute before I can respond to you.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead, David.
Yeah, I mean, I think my understanding of this is that, in fact, there will perhaps be a need for cash flow borrowing by the town in advance of when MBLC grants and donations are received. The column on the first page that shows bans, the town would issue, if you go, so the 15,751,810, that's the town's local share. The next column to the right shows bans that I'm understanding would be issued by the town in advance of the grants from MBLC and donations being received. So my understanding is there would be short-term interest payable on that, but that ultimately the principal on that would be paid entirely from those donations and MBLC grants. And that's reflected on the next page.
And David, it might be good for you to introduce yourself in terms of how many years you've been with the town and who you work for, so people understand
Sure.
who you are.
I think many of you probably know me, but I'll do that. My name is David Eisenthal. I'm a vice president with Unibank Fiscal Advisory Services. I've worked with the town for literally decades, helping the town finance capital projects. I've been working with Paul and Jennifer for on this project and other projects that are coming down the road here for a couple of years anyway. So these are we've been running a lot of numbers and a lot of iterations, but that's I think the numbers are coming together at this point. So
I guess the only thing, and anybody who doesn't know, a ban is a bond anticipation note.
yes, and if I use acronyms unnecessarily, please call me out on that. I do want to make this as user friendly as possible.
And those are shorter term notes that are issued so that cash is available during construction. And then at the end of the construction, everything can be rolled into one single financing instrument that can be sold in an appropriate fashion. And that's what David is our expert on.
Right. And I'll just say that, because I will point out that what we're assuming here is that the local share financing would actually be done reasonably early in the project, in the spring of 2024. And I don't know that, we can look at different ways to structure this, but I'm assuming that the town could do a permanent financing at that point, because the local share financing isn't financing the last dollars of the project. In fact, you're going to be receiving the last dollars really are going to be financed by the donations and the MBLC grants, with the town stepping up on a short-term basis. That as Mr. Steinberg points out, the bond anticipation notes are usually issued in advance of bonds, but in this case, the expectation is that these would be paid off with proceeds of the donations and the MBLC grants.
So with that, I am going to turn to questions on this aspect of it. We did not do public comment, and I will get back to public comment later, but we'll go ahead and do a couple of presentations before we do public comment. But I just want to assure anybody who's watching and was intending to comment that they have not been forgotten. Kathy, you had your hand up, and I wanted to recognize people from the council and finance committee and the council, and actually trustees, if anybody has questions from the group that's present at the meeting, please let me know, but we'll start with Kathy.
Thank you. Len, unless I missed it, the document I'm looking at is not in the packet yet. So I have just a general request so that I can scroll, if you could put it in the packet. So now I'll ask specifics on what I can see on the screen. One is, you said the library will be making us whole by taking a bank loan against presumably their endowment. So they're going to, you use the term float the debt. So I'd like to know how much they're going to take on and what that means in terms of the draw on the library endowment. In the Q&As, I saw that you told us that the endowment is about $8 million, a little bit under, and that we're expecting to take about 350,000 of it toward the operating budget. So my first question is about the library floating this loan for us against their endowment with a bank loan. So I want to understand that better. My second, if you can scroll down to the first line that David referred to on the bands, just way up at top is where you see the band. Go up a little bit more. It's up. There's a line on the 50. or maybe it's down, it's the next page. That's the page, just freeze it there. So what he said is taking out actually three fairly substantial bands. When we looked at this in 2021, the band total was around $5 million. And we never saw the interest on that. So who pays? These are very short. They're actually a little bit longer. Who pays the interest on the 17.1 million, the 12.8 million, and the 1.7 million? So the principal, as I understand it, is going to be paid back to the town by this flow of money into it. But in the meantime, it's carrying a 4% interest. And the first one, the biggest, is carrying it for a year. The second is carrying it for a year. And the third is carrying it for a year. Last time, David, you did these last time, I think, working with Sean. They were 6-month notes. They were, when you say short term, they were really short. So if I do 4% times these bases, I can get what the interest rate roughly would be. Who's paying that interest? That's my second question. I think I understand the rest of the presentation.
Paul, do you want to go into that, or shall I?
Kathy, I sent you the link to the document in the packet. It is posted.
Okay, thank you.
So this is built into our capital, comes out of our 10.5% capital fund, basically, is where it comes from. And that's in, I think Sean included the pretty close to these numbers in the projection that's in the capital improvement program.
So Paul, you're telling me the interest on the bands is, in JCP, what we've been carrying was the 36 million with the 15.8. And at the point, since I'm on JCPC, I've been looking at that line. The 15.8 was an interest rate of 2.8. And I realize we can't do anything about that. And then the bands were very short term, being carried at 2. So the combination of these two things, and I'm going to ignore the 15.8 right now. That's our obligation. I'm just focusing on the bands. So we're taking on, if I add them up, a pretty substantial short term with interest on it. So are you saying that the town will be paying that interest?
Typically, that's how it would work. And you said it's a 1-year ban, and then it's a 6-month ban, and then it's almost a year, 11-month ban.
Yeah, that's what I'm looking at.
Yeah,
So the 1-year ban, I can just say 4% is this. The second one, I can take half of it. And the third, I mean, I can do the rough math on that to say.
We can work on that for you as well, and also address your question on that.
So with that answer, is there any way the library could be at risk for that interest? Since in effect, the town is at risk, not just for the 15.7 total principal and debt, but for the interest on this. This is just, the reason I'm remarking on it is last time it's a much bigger number and it's carrying a much higher interest. So could we separate that and make that an obligation of library? And that goes with my first question on how much of an obligation is the library already taking on in floating the debt?
So Paul, if I could enter into this. Yeah. The amount of money that needs to be taken out will depend on how fast the library collects their promises on their various things, including their grants and including their historic tax credits. If they collect it faster and they give it to us faster, then these aren't going to be as large. So that's number one. The second thing is, this is the same way it works with the school, Kathy. We continue to carry the debt, and we only reduce the debt as we get money from MBLC. So, from MSBA. So this is how it works with any other project, when the source of funds are being given to you over time. The town carries the debt. Leaving the issue of the library loan, Austin, you have your hand up. Did you want to answer that, or do you want to wait until later?
Happy to answer it now.
Okay.
So Kathy, thank you for the question. It's a very good question. It's one that we have thought about a lot. And the answer to the question is, of course, it depends. So we don't yet know how much we're going to need to borrow. So how we carry that debt and what it does to the financing of the library will ultimately depend on how much we need to borrow, what the interest rate we can get on what we need to borrow, and how long we can borrow it for. The trustees are operating in a little bit of an information deficit because we don't know how much we are going to need to borrow. That will depend upon the success of the capital campaign. It's our hope that and our expectation that we can carry debt and do the debt service without significantly adversely affecting the operations of the library. It's our hope that we can carry the loan and do the debt service without having to further obligate or further diminish the endowment. Why is that? Again, as you know, the endowment grows and we want to keep the growth in the endowment. And some of this also, Kathy, as you know, is affected by what's in the endowment at the time that we need to do this financing. So the market goes up, the market goes down. We have a relatively conservatively managed endowment and are confident that we have the right management strategy. So I can't give you the exact answer because I don't know what the exact figures will be.
Andy, am I allowed to follow up? What I'm
For a
trying.
moment, and then I need to get on the map, but go ahead and follow up.
I got the answer to that. What I'm trying to get at is the financial risk to the town. So I understand you hope all of these pieces. So just keep that question in mind. I'm not going to ask you for more information. So I'm trying to grapple with the financial risk to the town, given that 15.8 is what we said we would do, and we know we're going to pay interest on that. The short-term obligations have gone up a lot because of the flow of funds. And we always said we weren't going to go more than 15.8. And the big difference here, Lynn, on the school is quite dramatic. I mean, we presented the whole thing and 98 has not gone up. It's been great. And I think we've got enough contingencies. So I'm going to stop there. So I'm just trying to get at the risk, the financial risk to the town, meaning dollars, not both known dollars and potential dollars. If the library can't do what you're hoping to do on the endowment, or the funds don't come in quite as quickly, how much can you, Bob said 1.5 million could be taken out of the endowment, but he cringed at the word of 5 million, so, and I can see with an 8 million, you want to be really careful. So I'll just leave it at that and cede my term.
Okay. So I'm going to continue on with members of the committee and the council, and Matt.
Thanks, Andy, and thank you, Kathy, for drawing the attention to this. I had similar questions about the bands and the interest rate. So I think, I think I've heard what I needed to hear on that. I just want to thank Paul and the staff for getting this in our hands. I realize that we haven't had a ton of time to study it, but I do think that, a lot of the conversation that we've had so far has been, looking at everything as instantaneous when, of course, so much of this borrowing is structured over time. And I just find it to be very, very helpful to see it on the timeline like this, and glad it's going to get publicly posted. So I wanted to just ask about the final payment coming from the donations from the trustees. So that's the July 31st, 2026, 8,300,000 and change there. That number is the result of some of the assumptions that we made around the payment over time. Paul or others who wish to speak to it. So how do we come to that final number for the trustees, as opposed to moving some of their spending up earlier in the timeline?
I think the trustees can answer this, but it's based on their fundraising schedule and what they think they can raise and when they can raise it. And there's that bottom number is that's sort of the catch-all number where they hope that most of the grants come in, and if not, that's where the trust fund is the security blanket for the town. And I think from the trustees' point of view, not to speak for them, but they have said, well, how do we protect our endowment? And that's why Mr. Pam has gone to banks and secured, had positive conversations with them about, suppose we didn't want to just jeopardize our endowment, how would we manage that over time? And time is our friend on these things. That's how you manage debt like this. And what the town has said is we want to end our financing ends with the 15.8, and it's on June 30th, 2027, and then it flips to the trustees.
Andy, quickly before you move to the next question, can we please confirm that Dorothy Pam can hear and be heard? She joined us recently.
Dorothy? It's really a question that Lynn needs to know, because Dorothy, can you hear?
Yes, I can hear.
Okay. Because Lynn is keeping track, we have a quorum of the council present also. Austin,
But I have a previous meeting that I must go to at 2:00.
okay.
Okay, scheduled months ago.
Austin, there are a couple people in the audience who have been involved in the fundraising, Ken Farber and Jenny Hamilton. If you would like any of them brought into the meeting to respond to any questions, you should just let me know. I'm going to leave that to your discretion.
Will do. Thank you.
Bob Hegner. And please unmute.
Sorry about that. This has been very helpful for me personally. I have a question about the impact of this borrowing on our ability to do other capital projects. In other words, I presume that the borrowing that we're doing for the elementary school is going to be paid for by the debt exclusion tax increases that we have, that we voted on. Tell me if that's not a correct assumption. But would this borrowing in any way impact our ability to do the other capital projects in the in the sort of near term? In the next 5 years, could we start one of the other two projects?
So yes, it does have an impact because it's more money. So clearly that is the case. I think we have not haven't placed this on the entire schedule because the other two projects are still in flux as well. And Sean had worked up a different plan, to a certain extent, and one of the reasons we established the capital stabilization plan was to develop a savings account to try to pay as much cash as possible for one of those two projects. Right. So I don't think this has significant impact on that because, again, our strategies are solid of building up our capital contribution to 10.5%. And that is the reason we've done that, is to be able to take on this additional debt. And that will grow over time as well, the 10.5%.
Okay, thank you.
So there are other questions on the topic we're at. Shalini.
And you can let me know if this is not the right time to ask this question, but as I'm trying to grapple with all of these numbers, like we know there have been delays, there's been COVID, all of these things that have led to the increase in the costs that were outside of the control of the library trustees, and now they have to face the consequences of that, some of which is not their fault, but this is where we are. So my question though is, the repairs cost has also gone up. And so wouldn't us paying for the repairs have a similar cash flow impact?
We're actually going to be talking about the repairs with the next presentation.
Okay.
because we've also had somebody who's developed that information for us. So you might want to just let Bob Parent note that question, and maybe he can come back to it when he makes the next presentation.
Thank you.
Bernie?
Yeah, Andy, as we move along and launch into the question of repairs, I want just ask that everyone keep in mind that essentially 2/3 of the voters of the town agreed that the library needs the renovations and the expansion. And I think this is all helpful because we want to keep moving towards meeting that goal that the voters have supported. You know, we're looking at interest costs 2 years out if everything works the way it's supposed to work and all the tea leaves are red, those interest rates are likely to come down. But it seems to me that, you know, looking at the bands, doing back of the envelope calculation, it's $1 million over 2 years, 3 years. So not horrible, not welcome, but not horrible. So thank you.
So seeing no other hands right now, Paul would, I guess it was sort of, Kathy, before you have a question before I may go to the repair question.
Yeah, I just want to build a little bit on Bob Hegner's question. So Bob, you asked with a reference to DPW and the big capital, but the 10.5 we're putting into the capital cash flows, this has a big impact on that. And that cash flow is what does building repairs, buys vehicles, and does roads. And so as everyone has said, we can't really do anything about the fact that interest rates are higher than they were before. But I just did a quick calculation on those three bands, which are also much higher. So it's another 682,000 in the first year, another 255 in the second year, and 67 in the third year, on top of the principal and interest for Jones. So when we get the JCP world, when we get our revised, how much left do we have to spend out of the 10.5%? It's going to be less, you know, it'll just be less. And so I just want to say that it's not just the pulling down on reserves. We had a financing plan that was paying principal and interest. So it's real money is another way. And my last question, Paul, Andy, and as far as I can see, the furniture and equipment budget is a lot lower than when we saw it in 2021. And when I say a lot, almost $1 million. So the bluntest way is the library planning on coming back to us to supplement the furniture. And when I say furniture and equipment, AV, others. So I went back to look the 21 numbers, and those had been lowered by 400,000, and now they're down again. So these are just pure budgets. So it's a question. Again, I'm just focused on risk to the town, on, you know, what kind of costs are we covering. That's it.
Well, if you don't have anything, I'm going to turn to Lee Edwards. Just
all right. Now you can see my face. I mean, at the risk of seeming unconscionably naive, I will repeat what the trustees have been saying since forever. We are obligated to raise the money for everything beyond what the town has already committed. And that includes for furnishings and fixtures. And beyond that, the town will always have needs ongoing. I think the question where we began is there were 4 capital projects, and can the town commit to having the resources to deal with those 4 capital campaign projects? I have heard before that the answer was yes. I think in this discussion, the answer is still yes, although it would be helpful to hear it reiterated. The other needs, the ongoing needs of the town are, to me, kind of outside this discussion. But to repeat where I started, the trustees and the fundraising committee are in with all 4 feet to raise the money beyond what the town has committed. And based on our track record to date, I'm confident we'll do this. Thank you.
Thank you, Lee. Dorothy?
Okay. I may have missed this, but is the plan to turn the historic director's office into the place for the new $400,000 book sorter still there? This is related to Kathy's questions about the money for furniture, which keeps getting cut, and the furniture isn't just furniture. So that we can't just say, I'll lend you a chair or give you a couch. The costs have gone up. I see nothing that suggests the costs will go down. That has not been the direction. And when people talked about ongoing project problems related to the 4 capital projects, I was reading somebody's testimony recently about the state of our sewer pipes. And there is just so much maintenance in this town which needs to be done. That doesn't even include the new fire department or the new DPW, but the maintenance. So I am quite concerned, and I'm hoping to see some efforts to scale back the project. We know the town wants the library fixed. I agree with that. Okay. And I think we all appreciate the work that the fundraising committee has been doing. But the ongoing fiscal situation suggests that there's not going to be any magic coming. And today, when I heard on the plan that the loan from the library endowment was being counted on, I thought that was a backup plan. I didn't know it was something that was being counted on from the beginning. So that was quite a shock to me. So my answer is, are some adjustments being made in the plan in order to deal with the fiscal realities? Thank you.
Austin?
So, again, I appreciate the question. Let's start with the book sorter. The book sorter was moved as the plan developed. The location of the book sorter has been reviewed by the Amherst Historical Commission. They had no problem with it. Where the location of the book slot is, they actually preferred it. So from the point of view of historic preservation, the Historical Commission has no problem with what our plan is for the book sorter. So that's number one. We've thoroughly investigated the book sorter issue. Should we use it? Should we not use it? And we've come to the conclusion that it is a prudent thing to do. Over time, the book sorter will save on costs that would have had to go to staff. So that's, I think, about the book sorter. Second, the phrase is scale back the project. So the building committee, on which the town manager and others serve, went through a value engineering exercise, which involved scaling back on the project. We've come to the point where we believe that the project that we have is the project that both the library needs and the town needs, and that further cuts would not be prudent. On the furniture budget, we believe that the furniture budget is adequate. Why do we believe that? Between the budgets that you saw, we consulted with experts who work with our architects on what the furniture needs would be. And we've come up with a plan that will allow us to reuse some of the furniture that is currently in the library. The library is a library which serves the town. So over time, I think this was Kathy's question, you can anticipate, just the same way you can anticipate from the schools or DPW or anything else, that there will be requests to JCPC. And those requests will come in the normal way. We hope, because we'll have a renovated and expanded library, that the scale and scope of those requests will be smaller than they will be if we do not repair, if we do not renovate and expand. So we looked right from the beginning at the repair option. I know we're going to talk about that in a minute. We thought what we could do about repairs would not be adequate to serve the needs of the library and the needs of the town. We looked at it at the beginning. We looked at it again when we got an estimate for the last town council discussion. So I hope those are helpful in answering your questions.
Thank you.
Thank you. Paul, did you have anything?
Sure. So in response to Dorothy's question about the capital projects, we have to do the 4 capital projects. That's not a should we or shouldn't we? We have to. And the library is one of them. We're going to have to make an investment into the library, either through the way we have planned it so far, and it has gone through every elected body in the town vote, or it's going to need significant investment in repairs in the near future. And so I think there has to be an investment in the library, and there has to be investments in both the fire and the DPW. The town has made some decisions that have delayed projects, that have made them cost more. COVID has impacted the cost of things. There's a lot of variables at play. Interest rates are an important variable as well. So all these variables are coming into play, but the one thing we do know is that as we continue to wait, interest rates are going up. They aren't going down. We know that, but every month it's going to be more expensive, whether we go the repair route or the repair and the renovation and replacement route. And I think I think Austin said this, we have looked at the 2 options in the past several times, and every time have come down to the conclusion that this is the best path forward, given the amount of outside funding that is coming to this particular project. So I think that it's not a question like, oh, does that mean we can't do blank? We have to do them all. It just might mean a different shape or a longer period of time.
Thanks, Paul. Which gets me to the point I'm going to raise. We have 3 people who have their hands up, who are counselors, and so I'm going to ask a question of the 3 of you, and that is the next thing that we wanted to do was to get the presentation of the updated repair estimates, and if it might be helpful for this conversation to get both presentations done. So if you don't think that if you can wait until after that presentation to ask the question that you're about to ask, lower your hand, because I will recognize you if you don't lower your hand, and otherwise we'll go on to that presentation. So Michelle.
Sorry to not be able to wait. This is a more general question and it isn't related to the repair. And I think it's for Paul. It's a 2-part question. So the first part is the MBLC requires a bond authorization for the full amount is how I'm understanding it. So they require us to authorize the 46 million. And I'm curious what the reason for that is. And then the second part of that question is, if the library is unable to raise the necessary funds, do we have some legal obligation to cover that shortfall? So I've been trying to take in as much information as possible. And one of the pieces of information I received recently indicated that we would be on the hook for that for that shortfall. And I think I've been vocal about my support for the expansion. So this is the one piece that gave me some pause. If there is some legal obligation on our part to cover that shortfall, I do have concerns for how we would manage that.
Good, Paul.
So yes, most capital projects require you to have the full appropriation before we go out to bid. So you have the authorization from the council, whether it's a school building project or whatever, whichever project you have before we go out to bid. We have to have the authority to be able to contract with the bidder who comes in, and that's also my understanding is an MBLC requirement as well, and that's a typical condition for grants. And David may want to jump on this if you want to on that piece, David.
Sure.
was-
I'm sorry.
Go ahead, David.
Sure. Yes, that it is very typical for projects where there is funding from other sources from the Commonwealth, that the requirement by the state agency, whether it's MBLC or MSBA, will require that the full amount be authorized. Now, the question of how the town, will assure that it ultimately doesn't finance more than the 15.8. That's covered by other parts of the of the financing plan, which other folks can talk to. But it is very usual to have the entire amount authorized.
And so I think I talked a little bit earlier, maybe I'm not sure if you were here, Michelle, about how our security blanket is the endowment, and that's the agreement we have with the trustees. And so I think that and then it flips to the trustees. What is their protection? What is their role as the trustees of the library? But from the town's point of view, which is what my concern is, I feel pretty secure in the fact that yes, we are authorizing these funds. We're confident that the MBLC is going to fulfill its commitment. Barring them, just like we never know. Maybe they go out of business. Maybe who knows what. But I mean, we're pretty sure that and the MSBA, for their part, they're going to fulfill their commitment. We're on the hook for those if they decide not to pay us. I mean, but that's unreal. I don't think that's realistic. And then for the trustees portion, which is the other big portion, we have secured an agreement with them about what they promised to do. And I think, they are elected officials. They have a resource that most elected officials, which is an endowment, that is able to secure this. And they've also proven recently at the ability to bring in significant commitments. I mean, they have a written commitment from Amherst College. I think Amherst College will not back off of that. So I think they have commitments from federal and local. So that gives me enough comfort, and the fact that they've also backstopped that with their endowment. I think we should feel pretty secure in this.
Auntie, can I just ask one quick follow-up? Sorry, I'm just going to take it out just a bit further. Thank you, Paul. That was really helpful. If for some reason the library was to default on that agreement that you spoke about, would there be some recourse on the part of the town to deal with that? And maybe that's, a little far thinking, and I don't expect that to be the case, but I'm just thinking about the legal responsibility.
Yeah, so our attorneys looked at it, and there is recourse in there for us, the town, to enforce the agreement.
Excellent. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and I see Bob Ham's hand up, so I want to. Bob?
Thank you. I guess I would like to say a couple of things. One is that, the trustees are elected townwide. We actually think of ourselves not just as a library, but also as town officials. So it is not that we are thinking only about the library. Second is that it has been my hope and expectation that the point at which we would be making our payment would be at the point where the MBLC had made its final payment, that we had had our opportunity to do the fundraising that we had anticipated, all of which meant that although this, I could only look at it on the screen, but it looked like you were looking for a payment in July of 27, and that might work fine if the construction has been completed in July of 26. But if that has not been true, then my understanding has been that what we're looking at is a payment which is essentially within 1 year after the C of O has been issued. And so I'm just trying to make sure that the timing on this makes sense from our perspective. The second or third point, I guess, is that we have until the project is approved at this point, whether it's next week or the following week or the third week after that, we have not tried to receive actual cash from a number of our donors. And my anticipation would be that the flow of funds would in fact begin somewhat faster than this cash flow projection. But it's also true that many of the people who have been providing it in institutions as well have said that they would do it over a period of time. So we might get 25% of it in year 1 and 25% in year 2 and so on. So, there is potentially a cash flow question that has two implications. One is that I think we will be providing money sooner in some ways than you are currently projecting, in which case perhaps the bands would not have to be quite as large. But B, that there might be some delay on the last payments, and I just need to worry about that because I don't believe that we are going to be in a position where we need to get a loan of $8 million. I would find that horrendous, frankly. But I do believe that it is probable. I'm not sure I want to say probable, but I will say it anyway, probable that we will have to get a loan of some kind. But I'm certainly hoping that it will be a lot less than $8 million. And I would certainly hope that it would be something around or less than 4 million. Thank you.
Austin?
I just wanted to respond to Councilor Miller. Your very good questions direct back to the original memorandum of understanding. There are two. And if you look at the memorandum of understanding, it is very clear what the library share is. And the library share is anything above the town share. And the memorandum of understanding is an, so to speak, irrevocable commitment that we have to pay the town share. The memorandum of understanding, and Bob just referenced it, contains a due date provision. So again, you can look at that due date provision. It says the due date for our share is 2026 or later if the MBLC comes in later, or as Bob said, 1 year even beyond that. So it's very clear about what our obligation is. It's very clear about what the remedies are, and it's very clear about when we are expected to provide the funds. That's the first memorandum of understanding. The second memorandum of understanding will go to the conversation that we're going to have next, which is if the town council would decide not to go forward with the additional borrowing authorization. The second memorandum of understanding commits the library to spend, I believe, $1.8 million to help fund the repair option. So if one is concerned, as one should be, about the impact of all of this on library operations, if the town council does not go forward with the additional appropriation, the library is still going to face an obligation of $1.8 million to help fund the repairs that will need to be done, and we'll be again in the position of where does that money come from? So it's not a case where if you don't go forward with the borrowing up authorization, there'll be no impact on the question of library operations. There will be.
Thank you, Austin. So I'm going to turn to the next topic that we wanted to address. And Lynn, I don't know if you have the slide available if it's needed. And I want to introduce, for those who haven't met him, Bob Parent. You hear Bob?
Yes, I'm here.
So,
good afternoon.
So I don't know who's going to do the major presentation about this, but we wanted to get the subject of the repair options and the current cost analysis that you did and reviewed for the larger group. So do you want to take over?
Let me just, so people know, Bob Parent is our special capital projects person who is coming in, working on lots of projects, engaged with the school building, with the library building, longtime town engineer, head of public works, worked for Ty and Bond for a private engineering firm, incredible professional engineer, incredible experience. So we've really appreciated his involvement in this because he really brings a keen eye to the work. And so we had him look at the repair option and tell us, what does that look like today, and what in terms of how we can update that so that you're looking at apples to apples when you are reviewing things. So Bob.
Certainly. Thank you, Paul. What I did was I started with an estimate that Kuhn Riddle had put together in June of 2020. They had developed two options for repairing the library. Option number one had an estimate of $19.4 million. Excuse me, option number one had an estimate of 21.7 million, and option number two had an estimate of 19.4 million. The two options were primarily split into 3 versus 2 phases. Option one had 3 phases to be completed over 5 years. Option two had 2 phases to be completed over 3 years. What I did was I started with the cost of those projects in June of 2020 dollars. And I escalated those costs to today. Excuse me, actually to October, because that was when I did this, and using engineering news record building cost index data, which is a standard approach where they tabulate what building costs are on a month by month basis, and then you ratio what the current index is to what the index was at the point when the original construction cost was developed. That by itself resulted in a 28.7% increase from June of 2020 to October of 2023. What I then did was I then based projections going forward on a construction start date of 2025 for either option. And as I indicated previously, one option was to be built out over 5 years, or the other option was to be built out over 3 years. I projected those numbers forward at 4%. With the hope that we're going to start to see inflation stabilizing. Those numbers could be higher. You know, we'll see where things go in the future, but you know, assuming we have a 4% average inflation rate, which is certainly higher than the CPI has been looking backwards, that may be a conservative look forward. One thing I did want to note, and I confirm with Alon Tierney at Kuhn Riddle, was when these estimates were developed back in 2020, they did not anticipate, because they had no ability to anticipate, that the statewide stretch energy code requirements that took effect this year, took effect in July of 2023, which our current project is based on, has been updated to include, were not included in their estimates, nor were they able to benefit from the additional due diligence that we've done in terms of additional asbestos testing to confirm where we have asbestos, primarily beyond areas that we anticipated, but also in some of the ceilings and in some of the walls. That is one of the reasons why this project cost has increased as it has. Neither one of those were anticipated back in June of 2020. So the point to be made that the escalated numbers going forward, based on my analysis, which are 21.7 million, excuse me, I misspoke just a moment ago. I apologize. I cited the going forward numbers when I mentioned cost estimates. The going forward numbers are 21.7 for option 1 and 19.4 for option 2. They are up from what had been 16 million and 14 million in 2020. Those numbers do not include, again, the current stretch energy code changes that took effect in July of 2023 and are part of the current project, nor do they take in effect the asbestos, additional asbestos costs that we've discovered through the additional due diligence to make certain that we remove as much uncertainty as we can in the project going forward. So I think that's in a nutshell. You can see what's on the screen right now is option number 1, 3 phases, again, as I indicated, to be constructed over 5 years. 2 of the phases would require relocation of the library. 1 of the phases would not. When the exterior improvements are underway, they at that point anticipated that the library could continue to be in function, but during the other 2 phases, it couldn't. Similar type of thing for option 2. They anticipated that the second phase would not require a full closure of the library, but the first phase would, and therefore the relocation cost would have to be carried as well. So I think now that I made a correction, I think that's, that's what had been presented in Paul's memo on November 13th. And certainly if you have any questions, to the extent that I can, I will try to answer them.
Okay. Kathy, you have questions about the repair estimate. So we do that, and then I'm going to go to Pam because she had questions from before and now. So I want to let Pam go then after you.
Hey, thank you, Bob. As I read this, so I'm just confirming, you used Kuhn-Riddle, and just so you know, Kuhn-Riddle for everything but ADA and design costs used Western Builders, which was done a couple years before that. So your MEP numbers and the elevator numbers and thing originally came, and then you just escalate them. Did you at all look at the HVAC system and say, suppose we don't want to replace HVAC with fossil fuels, we want to go a different route? Or did you just use, because that wasn't asked of Western Builders, so that I'm assuming is not in this. Then the other question, this was asked during this presentation by Kuhn-Riddle on, did we have to replace the south elevator for ADA compliance? And it's partially compliant, you can go in and out of it. And the answer was maybe not, because it's in the historic part of the building. But I think what you've done is just build up the existing numbers rather than use your building and construction hat to say, wait a minute, can we rethink this, or what goes into HVAC? Because we now know a lot about the Jones building in terms of its wiring, its plumbing. I mean, there's been a whole lot more work done than when Western Builders looked at this. So those are my questions on these numbers. I don't doubt that the number is higher, but I just want to know whether any more work went into thinking through what this would really look like.
You are correct in terms of what I did. I started with the assumptions that had been made back in 2020 and projected them forward. To your point of looking at other HVAC alternatives, like, certainly if this project had to go to repair, I would expect that would be part of the work that would be done at that point. And I expect that would probably further add to at least the construction cost, but hopefully over, lifespan of the building, perhaps reduce the life cycle costs. But I would imagine going with anything different than was assumed by Kuhn-Riddle could actually increase the cost, not decrease it.
I just wanted to make the point, I don't even know whether Kuhn-Riddle made any assumptions. It was the one before that, because they really were asked to come in and do the ADA. So they took what was on a page. MEP, they had to even look up what MEP went, but I figured that's where HVAC and wiring, and that's all the internal systems as far as I could see. That was handed to Kuhn-Riddle to then build up, to add ADA and design fees to get this all done. Thank you.
Pam, thank you for being so patient.
Thank you. Thanks for the information. Back in the spring, a conversation between the town manager and the library director was a conversation about bare minimum work. And I think for folks' benefit, it would be helpful to understand as a comparison, what was the cost if Bob has actually looked at that. What is the cost of that bare minimum repair work that was discussed with HVAC and the roof? If you were to pull that out only, and I understand this is not what anybody wants, but I think we need to be able to understand what the bare minimum contribution from the town to the renovation of this building would be in comparison with the 19.4 or the 21.7.
That is a good question that I wish I could answer. Unfortunately, as I stated previously, I started with the same assumptions that were made back in 2020 and then projected those forward.
Yeah, I think, you know, I'm sorry, Pam, I think Rob Morrow had worked on that, so I can try and find that information if we have that.
I was going to ask if it's not available today, would that be possible to pull out as a separate item?
I think we had talked about the HVAC was a high priority and the roof was a high priority, right? Those two projects.
Right.
Yeah.
That would be very helpful. Thank you.
And the other thing that Bob and I talked about yesterday is that when you start doing this, you trigger into the requirements of ADA accessibility, which is a substantial addition to cost. Sharon, do you have anything on this particular point?
Yeah, I just wanted to quickly input. So HVAC, roof, and now the fire alert system. So that whole, the fire, the sprinkler system, all of that needs to be replaced too. Which we knew it was at the end of its life, but we're living on borrowed time now. Thank you.
Mandy, thank you for your patience.
Thank you. I'm going to stick to some comments and questions regarding this repair, which is said to be an option. I'm not so sure it is. So as it was said, I just want to make sure I understand that these costs don't include additional asbestos work that was not known at the time the original estimates were made, and therefore those would add to the repair costs of these numbers of 19 to 21 million. And it was referenced that it doesn't include compliance with the new stretch code that went into effect this past June, whereas the current plan for renovation and expansion and the request to increase the borrowing does. But the town council just passed a new bylaw implementing the specialized code as of June of next year. And looking at these numbers and the assumption as to when the project would start on this, I believe, and I just want to clarify that means the repair numbers would actually need to be changed. And if this was the default option because the town council does not vote to increase the borrowing, that these numbers would increase even more because it wouldn't be the stretch code that would need to be complied with. It would be the specialized code that would need to be complied with. Is that correct? And does that mean, in my brief understanding of the specialized code as we were doing it, it means that if we were to put in a fossil fuel HVAC system, we would also have to pre-wire, I think, or would we have to pre-wire for a non-fossil fuel HVAC system? Or how would that work with a repair-only HVAC system under the specialized code? This project, if we did not put an electric HVAC system in, if we kept a fossil fuel gas-fired HVAC system, that means we would not get any closer to meeting our climate action goals. And if we wanted to, that means it would be higher than this 19 to 21 million. I'm just making sure I understand what this 19 to 21 million includes and what it doesn't. And it also doesn't include any change of use or additional space usage. It would keep the library space usage exactly the same as it is now, which we've heard is not working or compatible with how the library needs to be used going forward. So that's sort of part of my question as to what doesn't this include that would need to be added in to better meet our climate action goals, to meet the required specialized code that we just adopted that would go into effect in June of 2023, and to address issues in building that we didn't know existed when these numbers were done. And then to address Pam Rooney's question about a bare minimum, that might be what we have to do in the next year and a half, but it's not like we're not going to have to do the rest of what's in this estimate. The longer we wait to, if we do not increase the bond, the longer we wait to address all of the deferred maintenance, the higher the cost will be, and it will not ever be cheaper than 19 million in this or 15.6 million in what the town's share of the project as we are asked to be fully bond out is. Is that also correct? That it's not like HVAC, fire suppression, and roof is the only thing the library would come to us and request at JCPC in the next 5 to 10 years if we do not have bond out the additional 9 million for the renovation and expansion project.
Okay, thank you. I see we have a member of the Finance Committee who hasn't had a chance to ask a question before. Alicia?
Can I just follow up on that conversation based on the question that I had asked?
Okay.
Right,
Alicia, if that's okay with you.
Yeah, that's okay.
Thank you. Sorry to cut off there. I think the overarching question there, though, is rather than getting into the details of the nuances and the cost escalations and the specific items that may or may not be included in those repair estimates, is what is the town obligated to cover in terms of basic repairs to the building? And I think that's what I'm asking for in terms of what is the bare minimum repair cost with the several different items in comparison with whatever the projected fuller scope of repair or renovation might be. So let's talk about what is the town obligated to cover. Thank you.
I'm waiting to see if anybody else, from the general principle that we have the repair of buildings, including the Jones Library, goes through the JCPC process and is a town obligation. And historically, that's what happened. And what the library was very patient in not making requests for a number of years because they were anticipating that they were going to make this proposal to do a major renovation and construction as a single piece, and they only asked for JCPC allocations that would address specific and emergent problems. And said that because I was on JCPC at that point in time, and so I think that it still is going to fall back to the town largely, though there is a part of, as Austin said, the second MOU that the library did make some commitment. I don't know if anyone else, if no one else has anything else they want to add to that, I'll go back to Alicia. Alicia?
Yes, thank you. My question is kind of similar to Pam's, but I'm just wondering in terms of the repair option, would the town be responsible for covering the entire cost?
I can only say what I said before, that historically we've taken on the responsibility of our of doing the repairs on the Jones Library through the regular JCPC process. And the only thing that's additional is the second MOU. No, Paul, is there anything that, or Lynn, do you have anything else to add to that?
No, I think the important point also is that the director and the trustees did not bring forward capital projects over the last few years in anticipation, knowing that they weren't going to be making improvements to the fire alarm suppression system and things like that until we, in anticipation of this construction going forward. So I think we have to recognize that they have a backlog, and most likely if we go the repair option, they're going to be coming forward with some significant repair option requests through JCPC.
And of course, with Coon Riddle.
Thank you. If I might just,
Go ahead.
sorry, Andy.
No, go ahead. I'll stop.
I just wanted to follow up because I think there might have been, I might not have been super clear in my question. I'm meaning more like, so there aren't opportunities for contributions from trustees via fundraising or donations or endowment or anything else if we switch to the repair option.
Maybe I'll turn to Austin on that one.
No, that's a good, thank you very much again, a very good question. A very helpful question. We pledged $1.8 million towards the repair. That's what we've pledged. We did that again, considering the impact over what period of time on our operations. The town could come back to us and say, we want more from the library. At this point, there's no commitment from the library to add more, nor do I believe it would be appropriate to ask the library to commit more of its endowment or to go out and take a loan. The library is a town facility. And what Bob Pam said, I just want to reiterate, which is the library does have a source of funds. It has an endowment, but we have and would continue to work with the town to be good stewards of this facility. The second thing is we do not know what available sources of funds there are out there that might help us do an HVAC system or a roof. The experience so far in the fundraising, and Lee Edwards is going to speak to that in a minute, suggests that the enthusiasm that has been generated by the plan, and the plan is for a renovation and an addition. The third thing is we've asked the development committee of the Friends to do a particular thing, and they have now spent years doing it. And that is to go out and solicit funds, raise funds for repair and renovation, for a renovation and expansion project. People are really enthusiastic about it because it does things like makes the building much more environmentally sustainable than it has been. It offers facilities that are not now present in the library for a teen space and for English as a second language. It offers what has been a priority of the town, space for the Civil War tablets and what we call a humanities center, which is basically the space for the Civil War tablets, special collections, and the art gallery. So I think what we know is that there's considerable enthusiasm for the plan that we have. I don't know that there's enthusiasm to contribute to repairs of the building. But again, Lee would be in a better position to actually answer that. Lee?
I think my hand is up. Yep.
Go ahead.
Go. Thank you. Yes, indeed. The Capital Campaign Committee has been very vigorously working to raise money for the project to renovate and expand the Jones Library. And we have succeeded remarkably in raising funds for that project. In the unlikely, I hope, event that that project does not go through, all the funds that have been raised, including from the MBLC and from private donations and from the federal and state funds, they are not committed to anything other than this project. And I have to assume that they will go away. Many of them will definitely go away. So that's about $23 million by my account.
Thank you, Lee. I'm going to recognize Anna and Bernie, and then we did promise that we would take public comment at some point during the meeting, and I don't want to back off on that because it is a policy of the council. And then we had questions from the council that were presented forwarded to the library, and so we want to spend some time with that too. And I know, Lynn, if you think that is a reasonable plan now for the next portions of the meeting. And Paul, go ahead.
I just want to note that I know Bob Parent has to leave at 3, and I'm assuming David Eisenthal, we had promised him a 2-hour window. So you just may see them disappear from the screen at some point, just so you know.
Okay. Let me just say to the entire group, if anybody has questions of either of them, please get your hand up immediately so that we know. In the meantime, I'm going to see Anna, who hasn't spoken yet today.
Thanks, Andy. Yeah, I think I just wanted to affirm what Austin and Lee were just saying, because that was why I had initially raised my hand, was to make the comment to Alicia's point that folks have committed fundraising pledges and to a specific project, and to spend it on something other than that project wouldn't be ethical. The trustees can't do that. So those are significant donations. They come with MOUs, they come with agreements, right? They're not, you know, well, some of them I guarantee are probably $25 checks, but some of them are a lot bigger. And that's not something that can simply just be reassigned at the will of the town or the trustees. And so that fundraising goes away, and that's significant. All those, the grants were for a project, they go away, they have to start over. And so that for me is one of the really indicative, one of the things that is very indicative of this project not being able to be rethought in that way, because of how those things are not able to be reused, right? They're not able to be, those donations aren't able to be repurposed in that sense. So I wanted to thank Lee and Austin for stating that so succinctly.
Good, thank you. Bernie?
Yeah, and thank you, Andy. I'm a little bit amazed because we keep talking as if the library isn't an essential part of this town. It is. It's very much in the fabric of Amherst. It's very much in what we do. We're the town of the book and the plow, remember? So, you know, we really need to pay attention to what is a very valuable and literally central resource for the community. The library is a social resource. It's an educational resource. It's open to everyone and everybody. You don't have to have anything special. You just walk in and you're accepted. It's an amazing service. It's also a trip generator. It brings people into the town, brings people downtown where they stick around and shop and do other things. I just noticed in terms of Paul's presentation the other night when we did the budget overview that town support for the library has gone from 3% of the town's budget to 2% of the town's budget. I don't know, I'm not a mathematician, but it seems to be that that's a reduction by 33%. So we need to keep that in mind. We also have to keep in mind that we're once again toying with turning down state money, dissing our congressman who's gone out and gotten extra money for us, ignoring the efforts of our state senator and state representative who managed to get extra money for us. And I also want to repeat a point that Andy made very briefly, is that if you repair the roof, you're going to triggering ADA requirements. So there's no such thing as a minimum. You're going to have to do a lot of work, and then you're going to have to do some more work to finish off the repairs that are necessary for the building. Thanks.
Yeah, I have one thing I want to say, Bernie, just because you make me defensive, is the one who always is looking over the budget for the council and for the form of government. We've had a continuous policy of increasing by equal percentages each year the major functional areas of town services, library, schools and regional schools, and except for 1 year blips for a couple for small amounts, we have stuck with that. The increase in other sections of the budget affects a little bit the percentage. So I think that you have to be very careful how you phrase that point that you were making. I think that we've maintained the same commitment of equal percentage increase for a long period of time. And we go to Michelle, and then I really do think that we owe it to the public to allow a little bit of public, period for public comment. And then I want to turn to the questions that counselors forwarded through Lynn to the trustees and the library staff. So Michelle?
This will be brief, and I want to appreciate Bernie's comments, but I also want to say that, you know, historically the library doesn't feel to everybody like a place they can walk in and be accepted. And I think that the library and the staff, the trustees, the folks who are fundraising, the people on the building committee, the task force that are associated with the building committee are all doing a lot of work to change that. And so I just really want to uplift that and acknowledge that it hasn't always been that space. I get it. It's a public library. That's our intention. But I want to acknowledge that it hasn't always been, and we're doing, I think, some good work to change that. Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. So I'm going to take a couple minutes to see if there's anybody from the public who wishes to make comment. And I'm going to ask that anybody who has an interest to please raise your hand now, because I'm not going to expand the list. What I'm going to do is the amount of time I want to give to people will depend upon the number of hands that go up. So I don't want to expand the listing as we go through public comment. So at this point, I'm giving it a moment because I don't want to cut it off too quickly. But if we're around the number that we're at, I think we can do 3 minutes. I don't know if we can have the timer available to us or from Athena or not.
Yes, I'm ready with that.
Okay, so I think we've now had 6 people. So I'm going to assume that 7 gets what's okay, so I'm going to cut it off at Ken. But the first, and I'm going to just take it in order that they came in. So Sarah Marshall then is should be brought into the room, and state your name and what district you live in, so we have a rough idea, and then please go. You have 3 minutes and we appreciate it.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes. Sarah Marshall, Eames Avenue in District 4, speaking in support of the supplemental bond authorization. Your term on Amherst's second town council is nearly over. What will be your legacy? Council has moved our town forward over the past 5 years in many significant ways, including backing the Jones Library renovation and expansion project and the new elementary school. You are now asked to authorize, because state law requires it, the additional borrowing needed to allow the library project to proceed. That project was not only approved by council 2.5 years ago, but approved decisively by voters. At this moment in time, you should not revert to square one and relitigate the pros and cons of the project. Rather, you should carry out the will of the voters unless there is significant downside to doing so. Some residents who have worked tirelessly to kill this project are now trying to persuade you that the remaining funding gap of about 15% of the project cost presents an intolerable risk to the town. I strongly disagree. I do not see the fundraising glass as half empty. Rather, I see it as impressively half full. It is extremely difficult to raise funds during times of uncertainty, such as we have been in recently. But you can make the difference. It will be town council's continued strong support for the project that will supercharge the private fundraising by throwing the weight of the town behind the library. I urge you to be the leaders we need at this moment. Do not be so focused on the potential risks that you cannot see the influence your yes vote will have on fundraising. Do not reject the work of volunteers who have landed significant donations during an uncertain time. Do not reject the work and support of our state delegation, Representative Dahm and Senator Comerford, and our representative in Congress, Jim McGovern, who have obtained an increased commitment from MBLC and federal funding. Do not cement Amherst's reputation as the city that can't say yes by rejecting another multi-million-dollar state grant along with millions of dollars in privately raised funds. Don't be penny wise and pound foolish. Please leave a legacy of 2 significant public infrastructure projects. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. And Jeff Lee is going to be next. And Amber, I'm not sure we're going to be able to get to you because you had raised your hand later. I actually, for everybody present, I'll wait and see what happens. But the council has a forum scheduled for Monday that is going to also be another opportunity for public input on this. And so I want to encourage anybody who would like to make further comment to also recognize that there is that forum and participate in it. But it's part of the council meeting, and I think it's scheduled for 6:30 in combination with the general budget, if I'm correct.
It's actually scheduled for 7.
7. Okay, thank you. Jeff, did you bring Jeff Lee in?
Am I in?
Yes, thank you,
Yep.
Jeff.
Hi, Jeff Lee, District 5. Yeah, I wanted to ask you, Andy, I know in the past you've recused yourself from library deliberations on the Finance Committee, and you've acknowledged that you have a family member who works at the library. I wondered if that is still the case and if you intend to, once again, recuse yourself on this issue. Also wanted to talk about the repairs that are being presented as the option to, or the alternative to not going through with the supplemental bond authorization. I think it's wrong to imply that the town has to pick up the entire cost for that, and in fact that it's entirely repairs. If you look at the Kuhn-Riddle document, there are 6 sections of what needs to be done. 4 of them are called improvements, not repairs. Coon-Riddle's clear that much of the cost comes from triggering a requirement to bring everything up to building codes for accessibility, which is a worthy goal. But there are variances for historic buildings, and if the work being done is less than 30% of the appraised value of the building, you aren't required to do it. So I think if we went to a smaller repair option, we could do it for much less money, especially the one that was described as Plan B, which was the HVAC system and the roof. And how can we say that the library will pay for half of the renovation expansion, but only 1.8 million towards repairs? That doesn't make sense to me. And I think you're being pretty generous with taxpayer money to claim that. And lastly, I know people who want the project to go forward will be quick to say that we lose all the raised funds if we don't do the full expansion, but I would like that confirmed. It seems like the prudent thing to do. Can we build a humanities center without expanding the building and get the $1 million grant we got from the federal government? I think they all need to be checked, and
No.
Excuse me? That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. Okay, I'm going to ask that I think Maria Kopecki is next.
Thank you. This is a finance committee meeting to discuss the $46 million project. So I think that we should be talking about that. The fact that the documents that talked about in the beginning were not provided to the finance committee, the town council, the public prior to 20 minutes before, excuse me, can whoever that is, I'm gonna want my 3 minutes. Could that person please mute?
Lee, you need to mute.
Lee Edwards, mute, please.
Oh. Amazing, because I thought
Mute,
I
please.
could not. No. Let me assure you.
Wait, Lee. Lee, stop. We do not respond during public comment.
Oh, that's what I thought. I'm sorry.
So please,
that's
just
what I thought. I
move.
will. Right. No, I'm sorry. That's
my
what I thought. I'm
apologies.
going away.
And we'll
I'm going away.
Maria, go ahead, please. I'm sorry.
Thanks, Andy. I think that it's really indicative of the problems of this process that those documents were not made available so that the finance committee could vet them, could understand them, and can talk about them here in committee, which is what you're supposed to be doing. I was pleased to hear Bob ask to understand the impact on other capital projects. And it's not just the quote 4 capital projects, it's all the annual expenses. And I do appreciate that some other counselors tried to get to that. I was very concerned, but not surprised to hear that some members of the library trustees felt that the quote other needs of the town are outside the consideration of this project. That may be true for library trustees, but the town councilors are here to ensure the health of the entire town. And that includes what will be the impact, which was not provided in the documents, to the annual capital budget as over these next 5 years, when these very large $30 million of short-term loans are going to be having an impact, and the interest on that. If you look at, what I could briefly see from the cash flow analysis is that we're going to be paying contractors almost $3 million a month. So when we sign a contract, the contractors don't want to hear about promises and information deficits and hope that Austin Surratt was talking about. When you sign a contract, they're going to want to be paid for the labor that they're doing and for the materials that they're using. And they're going to want to be paid as they should as that is happening. And as was finally admitted in this meeting, that's going to be on the town. The town is paying that. The town is paying the interest on that. And that is unless and until, or maybe until and unless, that $7.5 million that is still outstanding actually materializes after occupancy, after this decision is made. And this is all built on the house of cards that says that this project is going to cost $46 million. And I don't believe that you have received, haven't seen it publicly, the actual detailed cost estimates that would give some more inclination about whether that is a reasonable statement, not to mention looking at other projects that have gone over budget. Thank you.
Thank you, Maria. Rudy Perkins?
Thanks. Andy, can you hear me?
Yes.
Mr. Chairman. Rudy Perkins, Cherry Lane, Amherst. I sent the town council a letter when you were debating this in 2021. And I observed, based on the numbers we saw then on capital projects, that we had already jeopardized our progressive climate commitments for later buildings by severe caps on those capital budgets. I hope that's going to be defended, that those won't be impaired by what we do borrowing for the library. I thought at the time the scope of the project and the budgeting process were flawed, but here we are. So I'm not going to relitigate all that. I would like to suggest some things that the Finance Committee and the Town Council can do in a new amendment to the Memorandum of Agreement that would address some of the questions I thought were implied in some of the comments earlier. First is the money from the library has to come in earlier in the construction cycle so that we're not borrowing so much and sort of under the table subsidizing the library project further. And so that should be adjusted in fact, I think the amendment actually made it worse because it redefined how much of the library share was due on the library share date, if I read it right. I'm making it all due at the library share date. That's a mistake. We should have it come in earlier. We should have the library responsible for any interest payments that we have to make because of interim borrowing to wait for their contribution coming in. And we should make sure that their share is defined not by a dollar figure, but by their obligation to pay for all of the total project costs that are in excess of the MBLC share and the town share as stated. That's not very clear in the Memorandum of Agreement. It should be made expressly clear so that no one has a misunderstanding that the town's supposed to pick up the tab if costs keep going up. So those things would help reassure that the deal is as people understood it previously and as it's being presented now. And that should be defined in a further amendment to the Memorandum of Agreement. We all really love the libraries in our town. The Jones is a little different though, because it's owned by a different entity. It has its own endowment. It's only committing to 30 years of public use at a minimum in the MOU. And it was exempted from our net zero bylaw because it was owned by another entity. So as much as I'm from a big family of librarians going way back, I love libraries. I really support our libraries. I'm glad we're kicking in the 15 million. And I'm not going to recommend one way or the other on your vote on this, but I hope you will take this opportunity to tighten up that MOA and make sure that the commitments are clear and the obligations understood and that they reduce the cost of the town.
Finish up.
Thank you.
Thank you. Myra Ross?
Do you hear me?
Yes, I can, Myra.
Okay. It'll be very brief. I'd like to agree with Sarah Marshall. I'd like to also say that Bernie raised some very good questions and made a very good point, actually, which is, and it's what propelled me to try to raise my hand earlier. I speak as the chair of the Disability Access Advisory Committee. ADA improvements are not an afterthought. ADA improvements are part of what has to be done, just like a roof. You can say, oh, well, we could get out of it because of the Historical Commission. That's not the way to go. People don't think about AD improvements until they need them. And then when you need them, you say, oh my God, why can't I access this? Why can't I get in? Why can't I find a way to be a part of this? For me, it has to do with web access more than getting in. But when you make a website, you are supposed to make it accessible from the get-go, not as an afterthought. And everyone thinks about accessibility as an afterthought until it's something that they need. And then they wish somebody hadn't thought about it as an afterthought. So 30%, you can get under it, whatever it is. That's not the way to think about this. And I really urge the town to do it right. I think that the points made by the previous speaker about making sure that the funding sources are crystal clear and the funding obligations are crystal clear is a good point. But I would hate to see you go to a repair scenario, because that's not going to achieve anything except spend a lot of money. That's it.
Thank you, Myra. And Ken?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to begin by thanking all of you for working so hard on this project. I know it's not easy, and especially when you have to deal with characters like me who raise questions and objections in Amherst. I want to begin by saying we're not, those of us like me who think this project is not going to be able to go forward as designed, are not trying to torpedo the library. We're trying to find a library that we can all afford and love and use, and that will work for the citizens of Amherst. So please understand my questions are raised in that spirit. I'd like to ask about the interest rate that's assumed in the interest number that President Griesmer read of $7,944,000. Call that $8 million. I wasn't able to see on that paper what the interest rate was, but I've heard the use of the word of the interest rate 4% for the bands. And if that 4% has been used to calculate the long-term debt, then I think it may be a little understated, because from what I can find online, other towns in Massachusetts recently have had to pay as much as 4.5% or 5%. And if those numbers are used, then that's an additional $1 or $2 million in interest. I don't think it's going to be that high, but I'd like to know what interest rates you were using. I also would like to see if by Monday you could ask somebody to give you estimates about the asbestos and the meeting the stretch energy costs, because we keep hearing about those as not being budgeted or not being projected, but they would be actual costs if we had to have them. And I'd like to know that so we can know what a total repair cost would be. And finally, I would like to say donors to this library may be donating specifically to a particular project, and that might be true with some of the grants, but some of the private donors are donating to a library they believe in and they want to support. They're not donating to just a project. So if this project doesn't go through as presently designed, and if you have to go back to see to the donors who have committed so far or pledged so far, I think you would find that they would be contributing. And at the risk, President Serrett, of putting you in an awkward position, let me say, I suspect that if you had to go back to Amherst College and say, we're not going forward as planned, but we're going to have a wonderful repair project for you, that you would simply walk across the hall to President Michael Elliott and say, Mr. President, could you please be sure that that $1 million is still available for the library? Honestly, Amherst College is not committing to a project. It's committing to the town of Amherst through the library. And that $1 million would be there, and so would hundreds of thousands of others' money. I'll have more to say on Monday, and thank you very much for this opportunity today.
Thank you. With that, I had said at the beginning that people needed to raise their hands so that we parsed out the time we would know how many people were asking to be recognized. And I apologize that we've had to do that in order to control the meeting, because I know that there's a couple of people who raised their hands since then, but to just keep adding on and invites that, and then it becomes impossible to enforce. But I also want to again repeat that this is not the last, the most important public comment period, that we do have a budget forum scheduled and a forum on this particular topic at the Monday night council meeting. And it's the forum is scheduled, I was corrected, it is 7 p.m. and it is a part of the council meeting. And with the budget forum, it's a very kind of different format than we do for public comment. And so I don't know, Lynn, if you want to say anything else about the plans for Monday, but Lynn, you do have to.
Thank you. A couple things. There is a detailed cost comparison in the packet. And there is also a discussion about the contingency, which is $3 million in the memo from the town manager. This has been a very informative discussion from my perspective, but I do want to mention that on Monday night, the town council will actually convene at 5 o'clock. However, we will be reading the town manager evaluations that each of us have written, and hopefully a draft evaluation that I have written. At 6:30, we begin the forum for the budget for next year. And at 7 o'clock, we begin the public forum for the financial orders that the town manager gave us last week, which the finance committee have voted on to recommend to the council. And we also have a public forum, and that in that same public forum, we will also deal with the library. We will not be taking a vote on the library on Monday. The earliest we will be taking a vote on the library is the 4th of December. So this is not the last opportunity. I also want to encourage anybody else who has questions or suggestions, like we received, for example, from Rudy Perkins about the MOU. Please make sure you send that to the town council, and we will do everything we can to address those. I have other comments, but I'm going to stop with that.
Paul?
Andy, would it be permissible for me to ask David Eisenthal before he has to get off to address what kind of assumptions he built into his interest rates?
Certainly. David?
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Paul. On the long-term bond issue, I assumed a 4.25% rate, which I think is consistent with a 20-year term that we were talking about here. We had looked at actually 4.5% for a 30-year term. So we are, it really is based on the term. And I think that that's consistent with what we're seeing in the current marketplace.
Thank you. There were a series of questions that were posed, and the reason we wanted to make sure we had time to complete our agenda for today for this topic. There were a series of questions that were presented. They're, I believe, in the packet for the meeting. Questions from counselors regarding the library renovations and additions. I don't know sure that they're there, but I can check that. In any event, I think we should spend a few minutes because we don't have responses to all of them. I think there was only a response to the very first question. And but the first question is, when will Jones come back to the council for a decision on whether or not to move forward, including documentation on the financing plan, and will keep the town taxpayer share to $15.8 million, or the precise amount. And that was responded to, and that's been the subject of a lot of the discussion today. Okay, I see that there is some more information. Lynn, do you, since you've been the keeper of this, do you want to take over for a few minutes?
Yeah, but this is also answers that came from the trustees. So on the very first one, as Andy has mentioned, we will come back to the council at the earliest on the 4th of December, and it does require a 2/3 vote of the council, regardless of how many councilors are present. So it's 9 councilors must vote for the project. The latest cost estimates, the one that we are dealing with is this one. This was the other cost estimate that came in, but when reconciled, it ended up being this one. I'm going to ask Sharon to jump in on number 3, which we all partially addressed before. Is there anything else to add to that?
No, I don't think so.
Okay. The next question was regarding the book sorter. And Sharon, any further comments on this?
No, I just want to highlight my conversation with the, Greenfield Public Library director. The book sorter is very much a part of it's an integral part of our service model. Our usage is going to skyrocket in a very good way. And what we want is for staff to be on the front lines, doing what they do best, which is, serve the public, the customer service aspect. The technology is meant to just check books in. And it's coming in at a cost of $230,000 because it's on the state bid list. So it's a really important piece of this project.
And you have a comment here about talking with Forbes?
I haven't spoken with Forbes, but I invite any of you to go and chat with Lisa. I would think that if she were going through a building project, she would switch over to RFID in a heartbeat.
Okay. The next question was really dealing with what happens to the operational plans when the Jones is closed. And Sharon, I'm going to come back to you.
Sure. So we don't know yet. And so much of it depends on how much square footage we're going to have and the location, and will it be in more than one building? But staff are ready to make those decisions based on whatever site is chosen. And no one knows better than the staff what the needs of the patrons are. And they will absolutely, we've discussed with the town manager that we would love a central location for, pickup of holds, as well as ESL. That's an important piece. A lot of those users take the bus, and so not having to transfer bus lines is really important. So yeah, it's to be determined.
Okay, I'm going to go through all the questions and then come back. Okay. Sharon, can you talk about where you are in seeking a temporary home and what you anticipate for cost and location?
Bob Parent and I were just working with Simone on this. We did just have to reject the bids that came in because there wasn't enough square footage being offered. So Simone will put out a new RFP possibly after Thanksgiving, I think, and responses will be due sometime end of January, beginning of February. And so, yeah, that's all I can say about that.
Okay. Number 7, Bob, Pam, you really are the one that deals with the current endowment. I can't see who else is.
Okay.
Yes.
Well, the answer is correct. It is 4% draw rate. For this year, it was 351,501. That is the highest it's been in a while. It's generally been between 300 and 320, 330. Those have been adequate to service the needs of the library. I can't tell you what it will be in the immediate future, but for next year, it is going to include a very good year when it had reached $10 million, but that doesn't mean that in future years it will always be up. So that is where we are.
Thank you.
Lynn, I just want to add, the draw rate is set by a policy of the board. If the board found that we needed more money from the endowment, we could raise the draw rate. At colleges, they go as high as 5 or sometimes 6% on a draw on their endowment. So just, we all ought to remember, this is set by a policy of the board over several years with the good stewardship of our trustees and our treasurer. We've lowered the draw rate so as to preserve the value of the endowment, but that's a variable figure. It can be changed as needed.
Thank you both for that more thorough answer. Number 8, Sharon, I believe this is you again.
Yeah, so we have already in our budget for this fiscal year, we have money to hire another custodian to handle the increased usage. And because of the automated materials handling system, we're not planning on any additional staff.
Okay. Number 9 is really, I believe, either Kent Farber or Jenny Hamilton. Do either one of them, are either of them in the room?
Lynn, this question, Lee Edwards answered this question.
Okay.
So,
Lee, Joe, go ahead, Austin, please.
This question has been answered. On the basis of what we know, the funds that we have available are not transferable to a repair option. And I can walk across the hall and pitch the president of the college on repair, but I'm going to just repeat what Lee Edwards said, and that is, you all know this if you've done fundraising. People contribute funds to a project. It's different from annual funds. Annual funds, I think, right, people contribute because they love the library. So I think what Lee Edwards said is the right answer, which is if we say no to this, millions of dollars go away.
What is the plan if we cannot go forward? And this is the renovation question that I think we spent a lot of time on, so I'm not sure that we need to spend any more time on that. Cost to repair, we've had quite a discussion about that, including what that cost estimate does not include. And then we get to the timing on the library, and that is before you. And if there are other people associated with the building project that would like to answer this, please jump in.
Yeah, so the plan is to go out to bid in January. In March, we would sign a contract with a general contractor. And what Paul has said is that as of June 30th of 2024, that's when the North Common is going to be complete. Construction will go from April of 24 to November, December of 25-ish, and then a grand reopening in December of 25.
This is the whole issue of the financial risk, and it's a combination of issues related to fundraising, confidence that the town will fund this, which then actually convinces bidders, responsible bidders, to bid, and also the issue of how to deal with slightly higher budgets. Is there any, Austin, would you or anyone else want to speak to this?
One other thing that I'd like to add is the fact that, so a vote now will allow donors to donate to the capital campaign at, in this calendar year, which is really important. Otherwise, they'll probably wait until December of next year. This is an important question. We do have a strict deadline with the NBLC to sign a contract with a general contractor by June of next year. We are all very worried that if we put off a town council vote till January or February, it will risk that piece. We also need time to outfit the swing space and move into it. So those are all the reasons, along with having the money in place for bidders. Thank you.
And then this was a piece of information that was provided in the packet on Monday. And then the issue of the money being turned over to the town.
And so the goal is, the minute we get it, we will turn it over to the town. The reason we haven't been doing that now is because we know we need another town council vote. And honestly, the logistics of sending it over to the town and then the town giving it back to us and then us, cutting checks for all of these donors is a bit of a logistical nightmare. So I have a feeling the town's accounting department is happy that we have not given the money yet, not until we know that the project is in place.
May I just say, Lynn, again, it's really important to be clear about this. What our capital campaign folks have been doing is they've been asking people to pledge. And they've been asking people to pledge because if the project doesn't go forward, it eliminates returning money to folks. And the longer that we continue with the uncertainty, the longer it's going to be before the town actually gets money from the library. So having a decision now to raise the bond authorization is going to be important in being able to say to people, we now know this project is going forward. Turn your pledges into contributions, and as Sharon said, we turn those pledges over to the town. One other thing, this issue of fundraising expenses has been raised. Every capital campaign should be run as efficiently and with as low a overhead as this one has been. If you go and you talk to the fundraisers at Amherst or at UMass, you find that what they'll tell you is that the fundraising expenses are usually in the neighborhood of 7% or 8%. Our fundraising expenses are de minimis in comparison with what they are for other capital campaigns.
Thank you for that. Lee, you have your hand up?
Well, yeah. No. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, yeah. I want to reiterate what Austin has said, and also the funds that the capital campaign committee has raised are not fungible. They will not be turned over for any prepared activities. And that's about, by my count, $23 million. So thank you.
Thank you. This was some more work or question regarding the federal grants and when do we receive them?
One of the things that I wanted to say in addition to what's in front of you, every grant is different. And so the Jones Library Inc. had to apply for these grants. So the money has to come to the library. It can't go to the town. And honestly, the town accounting department is lucky that it doesn't have to go through them, because these are very complicated grants to oversee. So it's because we are also our own 501c3 that we were able to apply for these. And so here's the list about, when the money will come in.
Thank you. Library endowment, here's information on it. We discussed it earlier, but here's more detail. And then we have further questions about the FF&E and the assurance that it's all in the budget. Here's some pictures of what the building looks like now, as the public can see if they're in the library. And here's information we shared with you earlier about option 1 and 2. And this is in the packet. So are there questions about this?
Opening it up to back to the committee and the council if there are additional questions. And if not, then we'll close out this portion of the finance committee meeting and stay for a couple of minutes as a finance committee to just make sure that we're planning for going forward. Kathy, though.
This is not so much a question as a comment. I shared this with Paul. I noticed that Greenfield, when it closed their library to build a new one, they got some kind of dispensation that they could do a lot of the services online. So it was a question, if you run into, you can't find the ideal space, can you still move forward? So it was just, and Paul said, people knew that already, but I just wanted to bring that up, that it's, to me, it allows you a little wiggle room.
Yay!
Play mute, please.
Yay!
Lee Edwards, please mute Lee.
Bob?
Yes, just a quick comment. If you add up all of the money that the library has committed to raise, it has been of the order of $15 to $17 million. That is not something that one can easily say, why don't you just add another $1 million here, another $500,000 there? That is not asking something that is reasonable. So I just want to be clear that although there may still be a gap of 7.5, 8, 8.5, whatever that number will turn out to be, it is not something that one can continually say, why don't you just add a few more dollars? Because it's a lot of money. And I don't know that there are very many public projects of this kind which have had that kind of contribution from local citizens, as well as state and federal grants that have been given at the request of the fundraising committee. Thank you.
Andy?
Okay, I don't see any, I don't see any other hands from counselors or any. Lynn, your hand is up, so.
Yeah, I want to make sure that if there are any counselors who have additional questions or information they would like, that they tell us now, or they contact us within the next day or two, so that we can try our best to get it, and also recognize that there are some things we just may not be able to get.
Pam?
Thank you. I would like to ask for a snapshot of the capital plan, the 5-year capital plan, with the interest that we're talking about in the right year and in the correct amount, so that we actually see the ramifications of any of the borrowing against our capital plan. Thank you.
I'm going to ask Paul if that is feasible.
I believe so.
Thank you. Okay, Pam, is there anything else?
Okay, so I think that we can close out this portion of the meeting, and then just stay with for the anybody's welcome to stay for the rest of the finance committee meeting, though I'd probably you would want to move to the audience. We're not going to be meeting for very long, and it's just generally to make sure we're together on process more than anything else, given that this has been a pretty exhausting meeting. But I really want to thank the trustees for having been here and the information that you provided. And it's been very helpful to help the finance committee and the council to understand what the request is and to process the information. So a big thank you to our friends on the trustees and the library staff. And I want to thank everybody else who participated in the presentation, even though I think that our two consultants are gone now, but Paul, please convey to them our appreciation. And with that, I don't know if you want to adjourn your meeting.
Yeah, Andy, if it would be okay with you, I'd like to adjourn the meeting of the Jones Library Board of Trustees. And again, thank you very much to the counselors and the members of the Finance Committee.
Thank you.
And Lynn, I don't know, we still have, we're going to adjourn the council meeting, then have to move other counselors into the audience.
At this point, I'm going to adjourn the full council meeting, but not the finance committee. Thank you. At 8:20, I mean at 3:28.
Okay, thank you. So to be really quick about things, one thing, because I see that Mandy is still here, we had originally had the funding schedule for the rental registration bylaw on the agenda today. I think that we concluded that it's a big topic to get in this late. Kathy has done some thoughts about some beyond thoughts, actually significant analysis. And without getting into the detail, she might tell us about just generally what the topic, what she did, but it's not something that I think we're in a position to talk about today, and we're going to have to factor that into our planning for our next meeting to really come back to the discussion because of the uncertainty about today. Rob Mora is not present, and it really limits our ability to have that conversation anyway, even if there was energy and willingness to put the time in at this point. But I don't know if what Lynn had said at the beginning of the meeting, I will repeat, which is that there's nothing to would get in the way of if there's a first reading of the proposed bylaw, it's not contingent upon the fee schedule. I don't know if Mandy, if you have any comments about that, or if you want me to just go ahead and let Kathy describe what she sent to you earlier and sent to several others of us.
You can let Kathy go.
Okay, Kathy.
Yeah, I don't want to take time. I sent it. It's what we agreed to when we met. When did we meet? On Tuesday? That I had I'd looked at the fee schedule a bit and tried a different fee for permit and a different fee for inspection. I also took a look at the bylaw regulations for the frequency of inspections, and I was working off the KP Law version, and I was just focused on how often and how many. So I had some changes that would potentially lower the inspection cost number. So I was in the fees, I was trying to get to the same revenues that we needed to cover it. So I sent them to Mandy and Andy very late today. And I thought it probably needs to be discussed at CRC so people can say you're crazy or that's a viable option. And I didn't send it to anyone else on the committee other than Athena, I think, just to a record. So I did a spreadsheet. I used the spreadsheet to calculate, to do a calculation and did a memo on what the changes were. And that's it, Andy, because I think without getting into the detail of what I look like, people can't respond, and we don't have time for that. So I'd rather work first with Mandy, and people have been looking at this a lot. And I'll end.
Okay, so I was just trying to figure out one additional thing, and that is whether it should go in the packet for today's meeting or whether you would prefer to talk to Mandy and then make the decision as to whether you want to share it with the committee and put it in the packet then.
Well, as far as I'm concerned, since we're not talking about it today, it doesn't need to be in today's packet, but I would like to be able, I don't have a way to share it with other committee members without violating that we should only do it in a public meeting. So Mandy can weigh in on this.
Okay, Andy?
So it might be wise with Kathy having just summarized it to put it in today's finance committee packet and town council packet, simply because as Andy indicated, I believe the regulations and bylaws will be on Monday's council agenda for a first reading. And I haven't, all honesty, I haven't looked at what Kathy sent me yet, but she sent some marked up versions of a regulations, I believe. And they're on for a first reading on Monday because GOL on Wednesday voted clear, consistent, and actionable a revised version of the regulations and bylaws based on the KP Law opinion, having revised it for clarity, consistency, and actionability. So that would, if it goes in today's packet, that would allow it to potentially go in Monday's packet for the council if the president deems so. And like I said, I haven't looked at it, so that other councilors could see what Kathy might be bringing up as potential discussion and requests for revision after the first reading or at the first reading.
That works for me. And Mandy, I didn't actually redline it. I put a comment bubble because I was working off KP Law. So it's two specific places. And if Lynn's okay with that, that's fine with me. So that's just focused on the wording of the regulation, not the fee schedule. But I could put my memo, the reason I questioned the wording, and the fee schedule in today's finance packet. And then Lynn, you can decide which pieces belong in the council packet. Okay. Okay.
Yep. And my question I was going to ask Rob Morrow, and Mandy might have access to the information already, was simply that I don't think that our committee has ever been told what the current fees are, or reminded of what the current fees are. And I think that would be helpful to know in full for both. So Mandy, I don't know if
give me a second so I can look up that document. But no, it is $250 per permit, so per parcel, for all non-owner occupied dwellings, non-owner occupied rental parcels. This is what the council voted 2 years ago, maybe. So owner occupied permits for owner occupied dwelling rentals with owner occupancy involved up to 6 rental units is, I believe, $100, $250 for all other rentals, but it's on a per parcel basis, not a per unit basis, and an inspection fee of $150. And since the current bylaw does not require, since within the current bylaw, inspections only occur upon complaint, not that fee is only charged if there is a complaint. And Rob, I believe, has talked about whether they actually do that or not, but it is allowable to be charged. But because there are no town inspections other than after complaints are received, I'm not sure there's been a lot of collection of inspection fees. I don't know the answer to that, but there is an inspection fee of $150 right now.
So thank you, Mandy. So the reason I wanted to bring that up was that if any members of the committee want to take the spreadsheet, which we all have or have access to in the Excel version, and sort of work with it a little bit to understand it better, it's helpful to know what the comparison is. We've had several comments from one resident member who is not happy with the $250 number, but we should remember that $250 is what the current fee is. So just to bear that in mind, when you work with the spreadsheet, the one big factor is that inspections on a routine basis are assumed on a 5-year schedule, because once there's an inspection, if there are no problems and that can be resolved promptly, then there's no inspection again for a 5-year period. So that when you work with it and you increase the inspection fees, it actually has a very different effect on the bottom line total than when you increase the registration fee. And so I'm sure that's a challenge that you just have to work with if you're going to, as you work with that spreadsheet. I don't know if there are any other questions that people have of Mandy or generally Bernie.
Just a reminder, for whatever reason, SharePoint doesn't like me, doesn't want to share, doesn't play nice. So if it's by going in the packet, you mean SharePoint, I haven't seen it. And I haven't gotten a copy. I don't have access to the spreadsheet. I don't think I need it. I'm not gonna take the time to do what ifs on the spreadsheet. But if anything that Kathy has generated for future discussions, Athena is usually very good about getting stuff to me, but you can just, if you're going to put it in a SharePoint packet, then just email me separately. Thanks.
Okay, and I think that the spreadsheet I did email. If you'd like the spreadsheet, I'll email it again.
I'll check it. I'll check again, Andy. I don't intend to do what ifs on the schedule.
Okay.
Schedule.
So is there anything else that anybody wants to say? Because I promised this is going to be about scheduling and process and not about substance, but that is what we've been pretty much doing in this conversation. If not, Mandy, thank you for your patience and your support in helping us get through this assignment. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
So the other thing that I just wanted to touch on quickly is that I did the best that I could with getting started on a finance committee report, because we have to do a report for Monday. And the Monday report, in a minimum, has to cover the financial orders. But I felt like the council hasn't seen a written report from finance committee in quite a while. So I wanted to sort of bring the council up to date on what we're doing, simply because we haven't done it in a while. But the first part of it, I tried to, is about the supplemental budget appropriation request, and it is based entirely upon our discussion at the last meeting. And that's an essential part. So when you look at the draft that I sent you, any comments about that, I want to put that in context. I'm probably going to be very brief about the library and rental registration, because of just to give the council some sense that we have what we're doing, though I think that the council pretty well knows about the library, because they've been as involved everybody else in those discussions. So that's why there's nothing there, as I didn't want to write either one of them until after today's meeting. Going on through the rest of the report quickly, the budget guidelines discussion is really just 4 paragraphs, and there a couple of them are very short paragraphs, but should be looked at for accuracy of comments, and get any comments back to me about it, because it's really just to acknowledge that we've started and to give a sense of what we're doing and to give it a piece moving forward. The items on surplus real property, streetlight policy, waste hauler are going to be extraordinarily brief, because they're just to acknowledge that we were assigned these, that we've taken various levels of work, done various levels of work on them, but are essentially we're waiting for at least for streetlight and waste hauler TSO to make recommendations. They have decided to put them, both of those policies, on their carryover list to the next council term. And so I'm going to propose that we put it on our carryover list to the next council term too, because we don't have the final product to work with for discussion. So there isn't much reason to say anything about that. The AHRA report, I did have a discussion with Michelle Miller about this, and because it was also assigned to GOL for different sections of the report, and GOL had the same problem that we did, that there were a number of questions that GOL and we asked that needed to be to get information from the town attorney, from town staff. In our case, we also mentioned possibilities of asking for some information from our CPA firm that works for the town, Markham, and from DLS. All of that is just not going to be able to happen within this period of time. And so Michelle's agreement was that she has no problem with us putting this on the carryover list to go to the next council term, but she would just like to be able to comment on what each of the committees is putting into its memo, and I thought that was a fair and reasonable request. So I'm proposing that our carryover memo, which is the last topic, cover surplus real property, streetlights, waste hauler, and AHRA, because those are items that were assigned to us that we're going to not get to, and we do need to do a draft and get the carryover memo to the council. There is a schedule for that, and I think we're actually a little behind on the schedule, but that's what what I was proposing. So I was just wanted to report that and see if there were any comments, and then I don't really have anything else for today. Lynn.
Yeah, I'm sorry, just a quick reminder that after we finish the public forum on the financial orders, that we just need to do a quick check-in with the finance committee to make sure that there's no change in the vote. And you did that very smoothly last time, Andy, and we determined at the end of the public forum that they didn't need to stay convened. So I just wanted to mention that. Okay.
And it has been posted as a council meeting.
At a joint meeting.
Joint meeting.
Yes.
I mean, a finance committee meeting.
Yes.
For 5 o'clock, no, not for 5, for 6:30.
6:30 and 7.
Yeah.
It's
5
the way
o'clock
that-
is the town manager evaluation period. So not before 6:30. Matt?
This is a silly question, but maybe it's not silly. I was surprised today. I know public comment is going to be what it is, but I was surprised today when we convened sort of a quorum of the council, that the finance committee meeting felt as though it became a full-fledged town council meeting, sort of just by virtue of the quorum, and the conversation was kind of very wide-ranging about the merits of libraries as a democratic institution and all these things, and it felt like it kind of lost track of our typical sort of focused discussions. And I'm just curious, from those who are sort of in leadership, is this how, I mean, is this how it always is? In other words, if we had a quorum of counselors come to finance, would this all of a sudden just is no longer a finance committee meeting, it's just a town council meeting?
It's one of the dangers.
Yeah, I mean, we run into this every year at the budget process, where we post most of the meetings as council meetings in the councilor show. And councilors frequently are not asking straight budget questions, they're asking programmatic questions. But we tend to go back and forth a little bit between programmatic. This was a little bit more in that direction that you were describing, because people were just asking programmatic questions, which would be equivalent to tell me why a booksorter is important, which would have been more typically what would be, but we're getting into the general pros and cons of libraries, purposes of libraries are, and things like that. So it was a little bit more, I acknowledge that. And so we really don't have a track record, because this is kind of became a one-off problem that we've not really had a lot of experience with.
And a good preview for what the council meeting will be like on Monday, I think, safe to say.
When you get to the point with budget forum, the forum is really for the public to comment to us, so that we don't really comment back to them. And on the financial orders, I think it will be pretty straightforward within the context of our normal work. And so, because there are multiple parts to this, public forums are actually 3 parts, if I'm correct. One is there's a requirement in the charter that there has to be a public forum about the budget every year, and allow the public to talk about what they think they would like to see us considering in the budget. And we could get a wide range of comments and suggestions, and in that's really for us, for thinking of, so that we have it as we talk about the guidelines. Then we might, that's why it's being scheduled at the time it is. The second part is since it's what we did at the last meeting was all of those orders there, budget supplemental, that's a supplemental budget for fiscal year. So that's required to have a form attached to it, but that will be very specific to the what we just did at our last meeting, which is why it gets convened. And what I'll just say is, if based upon the public forum, any members of the committee feel that we need to reconsider prior decisions made to recommend these orders, then I need a motion to postpone consideration of that particular order. If nobody makes a motion, then I just say, well, then we have no action to take and adjourn, which I think is what has universally happened. And the third part is the public forum on the library request itself, which is also because it's a new budget request, a new budget amount. And I think that will be more similar to what we heard. Kathy?
Yeah, I'm getting off that topic and just asking for clarification. Lynn, at the very beginning, said we have a meeting on November 28th. And then I heard you, Lynn, say also December 1st. December 1st is not on my calendar. So if we're going to do that, someone needs to put it on my calendar. So that's that request. And my understanding, and I started working on it today, and I will get it done this weekend. I started marking up the guidelines, because we've got what you asked last time, Matt, is when are we going to do the guidelines? They are in theory being, first draft is being read by the council on the 4th of December. So which is why the 1st of December is on the list. So I started working on both looking at a year ago and the most recent past year, redlining. And I think I'll be done with it, Andy, by the beginning of next week, just because once I started thinking about it, I could go through with it. But I really urge everyone to look at the most recent. He sent us the Word document, you know, whether you handwrite on it or do anything else with it, because it would be great if we could get to a pretty good draft by going through it page by page on the 28th. You know, maybe we don't get to final, but we at least don't sit there, talk about generalities, but really go, okay, page 1, page 2, which is, Matt, I think those of you who were with us last year, that's the way we went through it. But I'd like to not do a lot of prelude to it, just like dive in. Because the meeting otherwise will go really long and we need to get to a draft. And I think that's the main business for the, Andy, I'm right, the main business on the 28th. And if we also have a meeting on the 1st, that's the big one. I mean, no, we have a lot of little carryovers. Lot of little carryovers, but so that's, yeah. So that was just are we having a meeting on the 1st, and a plea to mark up that draft. Matt's got his hand up.
Yeah,
I did the same thing, Kathy, earlier this week. I started marking last year's, and I realized I had more questions than answers though when it came to you know, net gross income and things like that. So I don't know if there's any. There's probably no way to streamline that. I mean, that information is going to have to come out in a public meeting. So,
yeah. So the marker to me is both questions. I need to know more here, and it would be helpful, Paul, if we could get the final tables that are in the guidelines that showed us the actual flow of funds.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly.
You know, just separated out as a document, so I don't have to go to the end of the presentation, because the guideline document refers to those tables, and it would just be good to have them as their own entity. Again, this is for the 28th. You know, I can go back and look at what we did, but we always refer as shown in this thing as shown in that thing, and it's easier to have something to look at when we're writing. So thank you.
Andy, I'm sending out a thing for people's calendars since Athena is not here, but it won't have a the Zoom link. It'll just be to get it on people's calendars. Okay.
For the 28th and the 1st for council,
yes,
for committee meetings.
Yes, you got it.
Yes.
Remember, my request was we started at 2 on the 28th because I have another. I think I might be able to make the 1, but I know I can make 2 o'clock.
We started it at 2.
Okay, great.
Because of that, Kathy. Yeah.
So, and then people, everybody's okay with the carryover proposals for the next term. So, that said, is there anybody else who has any process or other questions that they would like to bring up? If not, it's been an exhausting day for all of us. And an exhausting week. So maybe we should call it quits and say it's time to adjourn.
Thank you, Andy. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you, Andy, for
Great
sharing.
vacation week, everybody.
Thanks.